all want to make money by doing something we love. If you could turn your hobby into your job, you'd never work a day in your life, right? Welcome to Hobby Hustle, the ultimate podcast where collecting passion and business collide. Now, here's your host, Zach Nygett.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 35 of Hobby Hustle. I'm your host, Zach Nygett, and I'm excited to have you here. Whether you're a first-time listener or a long-time member of the Hobby Hustle community, welcome. If you love collecting, storytelling, and diving deep into the world of collectibles, you're in the right place. However, I have one favor. I'm asking you to help support me with a simple task. Please make sure to like, subscribe, rate the pod with a 5-star review, and of course, share it with your fellow collectors. Finally, if you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment with your thoughts and suggestions. I always appreciate the feedback. Now let's get into the episode. Today's guest has worked with some of the biggest names in the collectible industry, helping brands grow their communities and turn casual buyers into lifelong collectors. His journey started in 2010 with trading card manufacturer Futera, where he realized the real magic of collecting isn't just in the products. It's in the stories, connections, and passionate communities that bring them to life. From collaborating with sporting legends to crafting impactful marketing campaigns, he specializes in helping brands harness star power, collector psychology, and content strategy to create engaging experiences that keep people coming back. Whether it's cards, events, grading, or collectibles marketing, he knows how to build audiences and bring bold ideas to life. You can find him on LinkedIn, TikTok at PartAtom, and his new company website, artifact.co.uk. I'm honored to welcome a collector, community builder, and marketing expert, Adam Partington, to the show. Adam, my friend, how are you, sir?
Zach, what a lovely intro.
Hey, man, you deserve it. You're coming all the way across the pond for us, so you get the great intro, my friend.
You Americans are so good at this. Do you know that? Like you're just far better at it than we are. You know, we're as Brits aren't very good at actually like talking ourselves up. Believe it or not. So you Americans are just natural at it. So thank you. That's very kind, mate. And it's genuinely a pleasure to be here. We were talking off, before you hit record there, and I was saying that I've listened to the show a couple of times, and yeah, so it's just really a real pleasure to be here.
Awesome, man. Well, we appreciate you taking time to come on the show. And before we get into it, I know that you're a soccer fan. I'm admittedly not a huge soccer fan, or football, I should say. So sort of, I know that there's a lot of different stuff going on right now with the different leagues. Sort of what excites you the most in the world of soccer?
Well, we've got a big World Cup in your neck of the woods next year,
yeah.
in the United States and Canada, and which may become one, which is quite topical at the moment without a jest, obviously. And Mexico as well. So that's a really big one. That's a really big one. And I think if we think about that through the lens of the hobby and soccer cards or football cards to a British audience, that's massive. There are some real kind of superstars that will be on show at that World Cup. But I think I'm excited about that because I always look to the United States almost like the birthplace of the hobby. As we know, collectibles have been around for a long time. I often say this publicly: humans have collected things for an eternity. However, in its current manifestation of trading cards, particularly, it's kind of the birthplace of that is the United States. So it's the perfect storm, really. Next year, you've got the World Cup. You've also got the 30th anniversary of Pokemon as well, just to slip that in there. And the World Cup takes place in the United States of America, where there is already a hobby that is orders of magnitude bigger than it is here in Britain. So I think that's really important, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And so I'm probably most excited about that from a football card perspective, but also just like a top line takeaway from your question, Zach, is the growth of the hobby on the whole here, and is driven by football because that's our national sport. And you may have heard this said before: football is a religion in this country. Many of our clubs are older than a lot of nation states. Like, these are institutions. Football is an integral part of British culture. So I think as we look at the explosion of the hobby, it's really exciting to see like football cards driving that forward. And then some of our other sports as well coming into play now. We've seen a lot of excitement around recent releases around darts and stuff as well, which is a very, which is a more of a British thing than it is across your part of the world. So there's loads of great things going on, lots to be excited about.
Cool. I love it. Yeah. No, it will be exciting. And, as football, soccer, we have to, designate the both. But as that continues to grow in the US too, like the MLS has become huge. There's some cities that have some serious following, and obviously having the World Cup here is only going to continue to drive that. So that's good stuff, man. Well, speaking of collectibles, right? I love to ask my guests and sort of understand what their collecting origins are. So can you tell us a little bit about, any sort of first memories or sort of what got you into collecting?
Yeah, for me, it was football stickers, right?
Yeah.
Soccer stickers, football stickers here in Britain. So cards have been around for a long time on the periphery, though, but far more, integral part of culture in the 90s was football stickers. Yep. So to enlighten your audience that may not be familiar with what I'm talking about, in the 90s in England and Scotland, and Wales, obviously, you had a trend of football, people collecting football stickers. So you'd get 5 or 6 of them in a pack. Mm-hmm. I've got one here, which I will show you. So this is one of my favorite ones. This is Duncan Ferguson. He was one of my he's my idol growing up for my team, Everton. And as you can see, that's very 90s aesthetics, right? Totally. For those of you that can't see this because you're listening, it's very 90s aesthetics. So my earliest memories, Zach, are like finishing school on a Friday, and then my mum saying, all right, you've been good this week. We'll go and get you a couple of packs of stickers from the shop. And you'd have your album and you'd have to try and fill the album. Totally. And then I live in like the Shire. I live in I grew up in quite a rural part of England, right? Middle England, shall we say. Staffordshire, the county is. So my closest city is a city called Stoke-on-Trent. There wasn't too much going on there, but I'd look at the back of the album and it would have like dates for what they call swap shops, where you could take your cards, and it'd be all the big cities: Bristol, Liverpool, Manchester, London. And there'd be these big swap shops that people would go to and then obviously hunt for their stickers and trade and stuff. So my earliest memories are like around these types of things. So trying to build this album, going into school and trying to swap. So the grail for you, because you got to remember, in England, on the whole, people are just football fans. Like, okay, rugby's quite big and people are into boxing and stuff, but there's a real kind of like you've got to. Normally, most people can say, right, my dad supported this team, his granddad supported this team. So for me, my team was Everton. So my holy grail for every season when they released the new stickers was to get the Everton shiny, right? So there was one, it was the badge, it was the crest of the club, and in the album it would go at the front. So each team had like 2-page spread, and you would try and collect all the players that played for your team and the shiny, right? And you get a shiny of the badge and you get a shiny of the kit, the jersey. And then that was my earliest memories, was trying to hunt for these stickers, Zach. So I've got very fond memories of that around that time. Then the next iteration for me was Pokemon. So when Pokemon started to explode in the late 90s, and I recoil at this now, but I would go down to a shop we have in England called W.H. Smith's, which is I don't know what it'd be akin to in the US. It's not like a Target, but anyway, you would go in and they'd sell Pokemon in there, and you'd buy a pack for like, if memory serves me correctly, around £1.20. So it's not a lot. And then you would get them, and I'd be riding on my bicycle, Zach, and I'd be stuffing them into my pockets. And now I'm like, that was first edition Pokemon. God knows what I had. I probably had a Charizard. I can't remember.
Totally.
Just all the big, and you're just literally driving around, throwing them around. And I think, what was I doing? So they're my earliest kind of memories. And then obviously I kind of dipped out of it as I got, a little bit older and started to get interested in girls and stuff like that, and drinking as we do, and then became privy to it again when I joined Futera in 2010.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, so that was a Panini product, correct? Those stickers?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Panini. Yeah.
So they did basketball for like the NBA and stuff. And I did the same thing, right? Like I had my, Michael Jordan, I'm a huge Bulls guy. So I remember like the shiny logos and things like that. And so it's interesting that there were so many parallels between, your football albums and my basketball albums and stuff. But I totally remember that. And, a lot of those old Panini stickers, there's even like European stuff that I'm a big Jordan guy, right? A Jordan geek. And so there's a lot of highly sought after, sort of as the hardcore Jordan collectors go after those old school Panini stickers. And some of those are European and they're just harder to find. And it's really cool. So that's a great memory, man. That's fun. So talk to us a little bit, about, you'd mentioned that when you came back into it. And I think that's the story of a lot of us, right? Like grew up as kids, passionate collectors, girls, sports, college, whatever happened, sort of got away from it. And then we reconnected with it. So talk to me a little bit about, what do you collect today and sort of how have you reconnected with collecting?
Well, it's strange, because I got reintroduced to the industry, as I said, in 2010. And I often tell this story, Zach. I fell back into it. It was a complete accident. I was living in London at the time. I was about 19, 20, around that age. And I met this woman that I was working with, and she said, my husband owns a trading card company. I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, oh, that's a blast from the past. I remember football cards, but it was football stickers when I was growing up. She said, yeah, this company, they're quite big in Asia. He lives here. And he's launching a football show on something called YouTube. This is like 2010. So like it's very early days YouTube, right? And I had my own little football channel on there at the time, which used to get insane amount of views because there was nobody producing content on YouTube at the time. And I wish I'd have kept that going. I didn't. I stopped. But anyway, right. So I'm like, well, and she said, I think so he's doing a screen test and he wants to launch this, this football show under the brand that he runs, Futera. I think you'd be quite good as a presenter. So just come down and do a screen test. I met him and I got on really well, did the screen test. We launched that, the videos are still on YouTube. Hilarious. I've got far more hair in those videos. And I don't look as haggard because at that point I've not had 2 kids. I've not got married. These things, life hasn't taken its toll upon one. So anyway, so I'm doing that. And then I'm spending more time with him and I'm finding out about like this world of trading cards again. And he's like, well, we're really big in Asia and the Chinese love these cards, right? They love football cards. Mm-hmm. And that's where Futera's audience was predominantly then. Now, Futera had been around since 1989, but they'd kind of pivoted and were more Asian focused. Then one day he calls me and he says, yeah, I'm moving to Asia. I'm just going to go. The business is there pretty much. I'm going to move to Asia. I'm going to move to Malaysia. Why don't you come with me? I was like, okay. So I left you. I just said to my mum and dad, listen, like, this is a great opportunity for me. Uni's great and that, but this is an actual job. This could be a career for me. I'm going to go with him. So we went and I was exposed to then collectibles and the culture of collecting in Asia. Mm-hmm. And I often say to people in 2010, around that time, I was going to these big events in Singapore, 2011. This is now 2012, around that time. And I'm going to these big events, Singapore, Malaysia, whatever, and I'm meeting collectors, and they met the persona of a collector, right? Your typical kind of like, kind of a little bit introverted, mm-hmm. a little bit geeky, right? What people used to assume with people who collected, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm in that world, and I'm learning the psychology of the collector, and then obviously I'm becoming exposed to things again, and I'm getting back into it, and I'm starting to build my own collection on the side. Not as avidly because I'm working in it as well. So that's kind of strange when you're in something and you actually work in it, But I'm very privy to it. Then I got a job offer back in the UK, moved back, met my wife, worked for a company called Phones for You, like a telecoms company that were around at the time, built my career as a marketeer. The reason why I'm telling you this is then fast forward, Zach, to 2020. Okay. I get a phone call again off Mark because we've maintained a good relationship. He's the guy that runs Futera. And he's like, Ad, we've got these licenses now for some of the big clubs in England, and further afield. So like Liverpool, Manchester City at the time, Paris Saint-Germain, Barcelona, Arsenal. And he's like, the hobby's kicking off. I don't know if you're aware of this, but things are going crazy, right? Gary Vee's talking about collectibles as a de facto asset class. Yep. Logan Paul's spending X amount on Pokemon cards. Drake's opening baseball cards on streams. I need someone to come back. You've got this marketing background. You know the company. Just take a leap of faith for me. Come back and we'll build this. And your remit will be to kind of bring Futera back into the the conversation for in the English speaking world for football cards. So that was my remit. So Zach, the reason why I tell you this, mate, and this is really important for listeners to understand, I think, is then I come back, and you imagine I come back in 2020. So I've been away from the game then since 2013, 2014, around that time. So I've had a bit of time off. I've kept briefly in with it, but nothing to any great shakes. I come back and I find this world that's just exploding, right? And I'm like, what's happened here? Because all of a sudden, when I was previously involved in the hobby, it was on the periphery of culture. Collectors were a little bit geeky, right? To use, I'm not throwing shade on them. It's just the reality.
Totally.
It wasn't a cool thing, right?
Yeah, that's the stigma, totally.
Exactly. It was the kind of thing where people would have their trading cards and they would keep them away, right? The girl would come round and they'd put them away. Anyway, I come back and it's just completely different. And I'm like, what is this like? And so I was like, right, I've got a great opportunity here to kind of help Futera reposition themselves as an integral part of the hobby. So what I like, where I'm coming to with this is I've seen both sides. I saw pre the explosion, and I know people attribute it to COVID, and there's a bit of debate about whether or not it was actually COVID, that, that if you look at the graphs, things were starting to go in the right direction in terms of secondary market stuff prior to COVID. But a lot of it, we can't deny that COVID did have an impact. 100%. So then I'm just back in this world then. And then obviously now I talk to collectors every day. I'm constantly thinking about, because I'm always crafting messaging and targeting collectors. What is it that gets them going? What's the psychology of a collector? Yep. Why do they do this? Why do we collect things? Like, what is it? What are them touch points? What incentivizes us to go after this stuff? And I think there are a couple of different answers to that, obviously dependent on the individual. So yeah, that's to bring you up to speed. I'm probably rambling a little bit, Zach. That's to give you a real kind of insight of where I've come from.
Yeah. No, I think that's great, man. And obviously, you're collecting today still, and you're in it, and you're learning all these things. But to your point about COVID, at least in the States, right? I think the reason in the US why it was sort of gasoline on the fire. Like you said, it had been building, right? It started to become more popular again. You were getting some sort of social media content creators, like we're talking early content creators, 2018, 19. But then when COVID hit, everybody in the US and in the world obviously had to lock down. And so you could do stuff through the mail, but also in the US, we were given stimulus checks and stuff. And so because of that, people had extra money. They didn't have anywhere to go. So it was easy to go online and get collectibles. And that's really what we saw here in the States. I don't know if that was similar necessarily in, the UK with you, but I agree. It had a ramp, and then that was the perfect gasoline to sort of light the fire and take us to, the craziness that is today. And now you see, huge corporations and businesses coming into the space and spending, millions, if not billions of dollars on products and marketing and all that stuff. So, I'm curious though, speaking about marketing, maybe you can sort of take us a little bit into your mindset. I know you obviously told us you started with Futera, you left, you sort of had a career in marketing, you came back, and that's sort of what sprungboarded you back into this collectible space full time. But some of those early years and takeaways as you were building your career, as a marketing expert, sort of what did you learn and how have you applied that to the collectible space?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. Well, I think I had an early experience with a really talented guy. I was going to do a post about this today, and I know we're going to come on to CardCon, but I was actually thinking about an initiative that I launched with CardCon, which is a show that I'm helping to build here in the UK. I'm just looking for them now. Basically, I like people. Right, I like people. I do.
I'm sorry, that's too bad.
I know that's not a popular thing to say these days, but I do, and I do, and I'm a little bit of a romantic, and I like psychology, right? So I'm always thinking about, like, why do people do things? Like, what is these motivations? Also, I like history, and so when the various talks that I've given on this space, whether they be at blockchain events, whether they be at, I was at the World Money Fair in Berlin talking about what coins can learn from the explosion in trading cards recently. And I often, cite back to these different times in history where, and you can see, it seems like you can go and pick out any culture from any part of the world and you can find an example of them collecting things, right? Take, say, the Ming Dynasty, 16th century China, right? People are collecting porcelain. So I'm obsessed. I'm really intrigued by how innate some of these traits are within us. And I think it's more latent in some people than others, but I think there is a collector's gene.
100%.
I have found, Zach, because I like to talk to people, and as much as I like to talk, I also do like to try and listen. My wife disagrees with me on that one, but I do. And they often say things like, yeah, my dad was a big collector, or my nan collected these things. And I'm like, that's interesting. I wonder if that's like a genetic thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I brought up the show is when I went back there, so one of the things I learned to do from my time in, let's say, less sexy marketing roles, right? So after Phones for You, which was mobile phones, that was quite cool. Then I go and work in a transport environment, right? For a vehicle tracking company. They sold vehicle trackers to transport companies and stuff. And as much as I hated it, and it was soulless, and if I'd have carried on doing it, I think I'd have probably ran myself into a depression. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to go back into the collectible space when Mark called me. And I've said this to him, and I say it publicly because I say it on every podcast. It means a lot to me that they gave me that opportunity. I think I paid them back in the work that I did for them, but still, they gave me the opportunity to build my career in this space that I really enjoy. But one thing I had to do quite frequently was think about buyer personas, right? Who are the people that are buying this product? And so I've taken that with me now. So that's what I mean about motivations. And these are some cards that we've produced for CardCon, so one of the kind of tactics we use as a promotional tactic is I was looking at what some of the other shows do, and a lot of it is their offline activities. It's like handing out leaflets and stuff. Fine, that's great. But I was like, what about if we kind of turn our leaflets into trading cards? And I built a buyer, because I do this in every role that I'm in. I build a persona, and in this context, it's who are the people that come to the show? So you've got your TGC player types. You've got people that are into nostalgia. So there's a nostalgia character here. There's your Gary V investor crew.
Yep.
That may or may not look a little bit like Gary V. Don't feel as Gary. A bona fide straight up collector that are just in it. This might be you, Zach. I'm going to be intrigued to know which one you fit. And then your socializer, and that's me, that just likes being around people, right?
Yep.
So one thing I learned from working in unsexy, unglamorous marketing roles was actually this was really important. So when it came here, I was like, this is just as important. I need to bring this with me, this concept of building buyer personas. And you can only do that by talking to your customers all the time. So that's what I do. That's why I've had my own podcast on the hobby. First thing I did when I came back to Futera, Zach, is I was like, I've realized I'm a little bit out of the loop on this. So what would be the best thing to do? Let's just launch a podcast under the banner of Futera, but we're going to let collectors talk about they can just come on and talk about the hobby. They can talk about Topps. They can talk about Panini, because ultimately they already exist, those companies, and they're far bigger than Futera are. Futera won't mind me saying that. They're the big players. So, but I then get to have these conversations and then find out what these motivations are again. Why are people now invested in the hobby? So I picked out all the big content creators, all the big influencers, went round to them, had them on my podcast to talk about what they do and the hobby and where they see things going. So yeah, that would be my biggest thing. It's constantly thinking okay, what, and the same in the context of the show, as opposed to just in my role in Futera, thinking about why people buy Futera cards. What is it that attracts a collector to those cards specifically? What are their motivations in the context of CardCon, of a trading card show? Why do people attend a trading card show? What is it about what gets them excited? What gets them out of bed? I think I intuitively know some of these things, but then it's about mapping that out. And then it's about building different personas and being like, right, I'm going to have to talk to the investor a little bit differently to the guy who's the TGC player, maybe, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, that would be my biggest takeaway from my life as a normie.
Yeah, no, I think that's important, right? And I think it's interesting. Like you said, I think sort of internally we know this, right? That there's different types of collectors, and that's cool that you made those cards for each one of those. I definitely am a collector at heart. I also would say that I have a little bit of investor in me, and I also like to socialize. A lot of the card shows that I go to, I'm there to network and hang out, and the cards are cool, but I'm there for the people, man. You know, like the community of collectors is just so cool. But yeah, I think that's so important. And obviously you've done a really good job with that, both, you know, at Futera and then obviously as it goes on. You know, one thing I wanted to mention too, if some of the people who are listening aren't familiar with Futera, maybe just a quick, you know, couple minutes or less, you know, sort of pitch on what Futera is. You know, obviously it's a card company. They sort of gathered that, but sort of what they specialize in and sort of what makes them different.
Well, Zach, I'm no longer the Futera guy, so they're not paying me for this. So I'm
going to I just want to make sure the audience knows.
I know. Zach, I'm joking. I'm going to have to send them an invoice after. By the way, on the Hobby Hustle, I gave you guys a plug. No, so Futera make, I mean, I've got a lot of the cards I've got here, which I can give you a rationale as to why I have them. Or these are like signed by players. A lot of these are old retro Futera cards.
Cool. Yeah.
Of the lads that I sit down with, I always get them to sign cards from my PC, basically.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We can come on to that in a second. But no, Futera, so those cards aren't a great representation of the contemporary Futera cards. Futera cards, I often say, are little pieces of art. They're very beautiful.
Yeah.
Their craftsmanship is second to none.
Actually, I have one right here, so you can sort of see. My lighting's terrible, but there's like a gold frame on it, and it's gorgeous. Like you said, a work of art.
Yes. Now, it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
Because aesthetics are sometimes subjective, right? And people have different conceptualizations of what they want from a trading card, like they do with art, and that's okay. But nobody, and I mean nobody, ever says Futera's cards are shabby. Like they're not. They say I don't like them because I don't like the way they look. I've had that, and that's fair. And what can you say to that? But nobody ever says that these cards are poor quality. They're exceptional quality. They are some of the best cards I think a manufacturer produces. The craftsmanship is intense. It's next level. It's why they don't release. It's one of the reasons why they don't release as much stuff as some of the other manufacturers. I noticed in your questions to me, you'd referenced the fact that they were unlicensed.
Correct.
That's half true, Zach. They do have licenses with a lot of the big clubs.
Okay.
However, the unique release, which is the card that you've just shown up, which is a card from the release that you've just shown up there, which is their like main release, Futera Unique, very highly sought after. The hits are insane. Like, you know, you're looking at a really great card in every pack, right? It's just mental what they do in those releases. That's their most popular release, and it's their unlicensed release, you know. But they do have licenses with the clubs. They're blocked off from the leagues because of the likes of Fanatics and the other guys have got them licenses sewn up. So what Futera do, which is you know, sensible and smart, as they go and work with the clubs. And that was always great for me because I tried to, where I could, there was sometimes limitations about what I could say as the Futera guy. And that was one of the reasons why in the end I kind of wanted to move on because, you know, there's just certain things that you can't say. But,
sure.
But a lot of the messaging when I was targeting clubs, cards for some of the licenses that they've got at fans of those clubs, you know, it was very easy to kind of, because I know Liverpool fans really well. Like, they're my rival. I'm an Evertonian and my rival team is Liverpool. So I know the culture around Liverpool and I know there's little buttons to press with them. Same with the Arsenal fans and stuff. So that was really cool, always working on the messaging and around these releases for the clubs. But yeah, Futera have been around since 1989. If you haven't, I mean, they don't just do football as well. That's
what I was going to ask you, if they're only soccer or football. Yeah.
The first cards they did were for like Australian football, Aussie rules football, I think, or rugby. They've done cricket cards in the past. My last release that I worked on for them before I left in late October last year was a multi-sport release. So you've got different kind of guys from all across sport in one release, right? Similar to Leaf do something very similar. Yes. And that went down really well. So they you know, football is their bread and butter, but I think they are starting to try and reach out and you know, good luck to them on that regards. But yeah, if you never purchased a Futera card, if you get a chance to get one, if you are into football, just get one just to have in your PC because they're so beautiful. The craftsmanship's amazing. And actually, one final thing, Zach, I know a lot of the graders, and Jake at MGC, he's a big grader here in Britain, and he told me that Futera cards, out of all the manufacturers, have the average highest grades. So it's not rare for them to get, you know, a 10. It's
Yeah.
just the way that because of the craftsmanship.
Yeah, totally. Well, and like you said, even if you're not a football or soccer collector, just go check them out because they are gorgeous and they are like little pieces of artwork. But that's cool. And like I said, I know you don't work for them anymore, Adam. So shameless plug for them for free. They'll give you a nice pat on the back. But again, I just want to make sure that the audience, understood the context of what we were talking about. So let's shift gears. That's in the past. Let's talk about sort of the current and the future. And one of those things is, as you'd mentioned earlier in the conversation, was CardCon. So can you tell us a little bit more sort of about that show?
Mate, I'd love to. It's been, Zach, like I'm genuinely every day I'm so lucky because I got the opportunity. I knew so there's a guy he's asked me actually not to make reference to him publicly too often, but there's the guys who are behind it. I kind of knew them before anyway. And they just reached out to me, when I was moving on for Futera, and I'd announced that, and they said, look, we've got a show in like 5 months' time, and we're investing a lot in it. We think there's a massive opportunity here. I'd been in and around, heavily involved in some of the other shows already, insofar as like I did this thing with Futera, which I was really proud of, Zach, where I'd get a former player, like a legend, to a trading card show. The London card show is where I did most of this work. And I would have the player sign their cards on stage so collectors could see the player signing the cards. And then Futera do this really cool thing where they because all their autograph cards are on card. So on the back, you'll see exactly where and when the player signed, so that they'll sign the card front, so it'll go off to production, they'll put the back on, and obviously then they can retrospectively add the date, which is really cool. So I'd been working in and around shows anyway, and have been there with Futera and built a great relationship with the London Card Show, which is the other really big show here in England. And they reached out and they said, look, we need somebody to kind of just, can you help us build some hype? So I was like, yeah, cool. I've got a bit freed up some time now. And so I just went in and just threw myself into it. And I've loved it because, again, it just gave me a bit of freedom where I could talk to people that I wasn't able to talk to as the Futera guy. Like, I can't talk to Leaf when I'm the Futera guy. Right. I can't talk to Topps and Fanatics. I can't talk to Panini. So I've loved it. I've absolutely loved it. Like, it's been brilliant. And the contract was only until April the 1st. And then it's going to be a long time until the next show. So it's just it was always going to be a short-term thing. But what I wanted to do, Zach, is I wanted to go in, and if I'm going to put my name to it, we're going to do it properly. And one thing I said to them is, I know you're not blessed with huge budgets for talent, but I am very passionate about trying to increase the scope of appeal of our space, because I think we need that here. You guys have already got a huge scene out there in the US, right? A lot of Americans already are aware of what goes in Britain. That's not the case. Right. So what I did is I said to them, look, you got to trust me on the guests. And I've brought Eddie Hall, who's the former strongman, somebody I know, he lives close to me, got a massive audience on YouTube. A former player called Claude Makelele, who played for Real Madrid and Chelsea. He was so good, Zach. They named a position on the pitch after him, right? He's awesome. Like the architect of the central defensive midfielder role, right? Which he developed under Jose Mourinho. So he's an icon. We've got the world darts #1 at the moment, Luke Humphries. And we've got a really big football content creator called Robbie Lyle, and a huge Pokemon star here in England called Chloe. So, and what I've tried to do with the guests is, like, when we first announced Eddie Hall, there was a couple of collectors like, why is Eddie Hall involved? Well, I'd included him in the Futera release anyway. So he'd done his first trading card that had been released a couple of months prior. But also, I was like, no, we need to widen the appeal. We can't just continue to talk to ourselves. We've got a lot of work to do here in Britain. Mm-hmm. And where we are now, well, where we were about 6 weeks out from the show, we've eclipsed we sold more tickets at that point than we had done in the entirety for CardCon 2. Yes, this is CardCon 3. So, and I've done lots of streams online, again, engaging with collectors, constantly talking to them, trying to get and have conversations with some of you guys over in the States, because I do see a massive opportunity here. And what I wanted to do is I looked at like the shows in the US, and I didn't get a chance to go. And I know there's been some criticism from you purists, but Fanatics Fest for me was the how can I put this? Was was a great example. Now, I know it wasn't perfect, but it was a great example of how to broaden the appeal of the hobby. So yes, you could go there and buy cards, but you could also go there and it's an experience. And I was
100%.
like, if we're going to build this, we've got to. So I was like, we've got to be big on activities. It happens to fall on the Sunday that it's Mother's Day here in the UK. So it was like, right, okay, we're going to have to think of something that can appeal to mothers. So we've incorporated a couple of things there. Right, we need the next generation of collectors. So how about if kids go 3? So we've launched something where any kids under 12, if they come with an adult, they can come in for free. And I'm just really passionate about that next generation of collectors, but also broadening the appeal, because I think there's more people that can come into this space. So it's been so much fun, Zach, and I've been really lucky. And as I said, that runs until the end of April. The show is on the 29th and 30th of March. April the 1st, my contract expires. I've got a couple of other things in play, but it's just been a great experience, and I've really enjoyed it. And I do think there's so much potential for shows here in the UK.
Yeah, it's cool. So I got to be honest, I'm familiar with the London Card Show, right? But I was not familiar with CardCon, and I started doing some research and checking out the website. And it's impressive, man. It looks like you guys are really putting together, and I know this is the 3rd one, so it's not like this is the first time, but it's impressive. Like you said, it looks like you're putting a lot of time and effort into making it an experience, both with the guests and activities. I know you had a trade night, and you've got signings and panels and, really making it more than just a card show to go in and, look at trading cards. Right. And I think that's been huge here in the States. And you're starting to see that more too, is making other aspects to the show to sort of go outside of the boxes, walking into a room with a bunch of tables and vendors. Like, what else can you bring for those guests? How else can you engage them? And I did not get to go to Fanatics Fest. That was an expensive trip to get to New York, but everyone who went said it was incredible. So I'm really going to try to figure out if I can't make it this year. But like you said, it was bigger than a card show though, so I think the collecting purists, they're not looking at it through the right lens, right? It needs to be this experiential, venue and event that people go to, because things like walking out to the WWE wrestling songs,
I know.
People went crazy for that from everything I saw, or, participating in a 40-yard dash, or, throwing footballs or whatever it might be. That's not stuff you typically see, but that made it really cool and different. And then obviously they had, a large section of collectibles and cards and things like that. So that's cool. That's really cool. And you mentioned, I think Pokey Chloe is her name, or her handle. So you guys will also take into account sort of TCG. Can you talk to me a little bit about sort of the balance between sports and TCG stuff with collectors, over in the UK right now?
Yeah, I can do. Just before I do that though, I do just want to also say, like, as much as it's from the outside, it's been a lot of work, and it looks like, and we've still got to pull the show off. We've said internally this week that we've done really well. And it's not all down to me and the guests that I've brought. I genuinely, like, it's not. I want to say that as well, because I think sometimes as a marketer, you're kind of only as good as the people are around you, and you're only as good as the product that you've got. They're a terrific team, so talented. I've been working with a great designer called Owen, who I've had people messaging me like, who's doing the designs? And we've had there's a guy called Sean as well that's doing some work for us, that's putting together some great, in terms of targeting and making sure that I'm trying to feed them with the content that they need, i.e. these great guests, we're working on activities. Can we do this? Can we bring this company here? But ultimately, they've had to allow me the freedom to do that, and I've got to say, look, trust me, this will work. And now we've just got to pull the show off. But I just want to kind of get, as I'm in a public domain here, and I know this is a popular podcast,
sure,
just say that Simon, who's the guy who's putting the show on, actually managing the infrastructure and that stuff, Zach, because I'm a creative guy, I'd forget to knock the Alecki on, you know what I mean, turn the lights off or stuff like that, make sure the toilets, these things. But it's a great venue we've got at Farnborough as well. So I've been really lucky that I've gone into a situation where there has been a lot of success to be had, but also those guys have given me the tools to succeed, and you need that as a marketeer. And then in terms of finding that balance between TCG and sports cards, there is a bit of crossover. There are people that collect football cards and Pokemon. It's not like there is a massive divide. I don't know if that's the case in the US. I imagine, like us, there's a bit of overlap. The show, we are trying to do what we can to just cater to both sides, and ensure that there's a decent split between them in terms of vendors. and we're just doing our best. But like the streams, so I've been doing like a stream once, trying to do twice a week, but on average once a week with a different representative, a vendor or a content creator across the multiple facets. Because when we say sports cards, right, we've got to be clear that actually there's differences within the sports card world, right? I know a guy who had he's going to be a vendor. He specializes in F1 cards. He's not really a football card collector. Technically falls under the banner of sports cards, doesn't fall under the banner of TCG, but that is a niche within a niche. Same on the TCG side. You've got your Yu-Gi-Oh crowd, but actually those guys aren't big into Pokemon. So you've got to factor that in and be like, how can we cater for those guys? We can't just constantly talk about, all right, we want to talk about TCG, but we can't just talk about Pokemon all the time because there's there's Magic, there's Yu-Gi-Oh, there's all the others. So that's been very enlightening for me, and trying to be sensitive to that and be mindful of that and make sure that when we're communicating stuff, it's, we're hitting all those kind of touch points. Same with the guests, I haven't just got 4 footballers. I haven't just got 4 TCG guys. I've got different sports and your Pokemon. And then we've done, we've announced special guests and I've done streams with guys in the Yu-Gi-Oh community to make sure they're involved and they feel like we're catering to them. So yeah, you're trying to, I suppose I'd make a decent politician, right? I'm trying to keep everybody happy here, Zach.
Yeah, well, we won't get into politics on this show, that's for sure.
No, that's for the best, mate.
Yeah,
it's for the best.
But that is that's great and that's interesting. And yeah, like the other One Piece too has been super hot in the States. I don't know if it's caught on over there in the UK, but like that was an explosion. And then it's even within the TCG space, there's new classic IP, like Star Wars has a whole game and TCG community that I was not aware of until recently. And, it's constantly evolving. It's hard to stay on top of it all, but it's good on you to try to, touch as many bases as you possibly can with that. So one thing that I didn't see, and I'm not trying to poke holes, I'm just interested, is I didn't see anything with like Topps, Fanatics, grading companies like Beckett or PSA. Sort of, are any of them included and I just didn't see that? Or are there challenges there with sort of getting some of those bigger, more US-based companies over to your show?
So Topps and Fanatics are going to be announced this week.
Okay, well, there you go. Breaking news.
Yeah, so we've got Topps and Fanatics in, of course. They Topps and Fanatics, to be fair to them, because they've got quite a big, they've got a big team here in the UK. But yeah, it is. I mean, I think Beckett have been at a previous show that have been at CardCon 2 or. The guys will correct me if they're not. Of course, I wasn't privy to those earlier shows, so I wasn't involved. Sorry, so I can't quite recall. Yeah, that's always like Golden have been involved at a previous show, and sometimes it's hard, isn't it? I was talking to the guys at Ghostwrite, not Josh. Yeah. But Matt, his brother and whatever. And, logistically, they were kind of like, it's cool, but we just can't make it happen between, this was like around Christmas time and it's a bit tough for us. So, yeah, that is a challenge. But there is a bit of presence there. I'd like more Americans to come over and get involved. I think we're going to need to harness that support from our friends over there. And I want anybody, because you guys obviously have, because of the nature of this podcast, you've got lots of people listening to this that are involved in the business side. Like, don't neglect your little brothers here and sisters in England, right? Because the space here is exploding. Again, it's nowhere near as big as in the US, but it can't be because you've got a far bigger share of the global population living in your country. However, it's growing. It's very, very exciting, and I think the more of those companies that do kind of help us build at shows like CardCon here and stuff, and build on this community and invest here in Britain, then that's a benefit to everybody. So yeah, I hopefully there will be more. And if I'm involved in the next show, which as I said isn't for quite some time, it's going to probably be late next year as well. So it's a long old way. But if it is, then hopefully by that point I'll have built some more relationships in the US that I'll be able to say to some of these guys, look, come on, let's get you at CardCon this time.
Yeah.
Let's get involved and come and see how this hobby has exploded. Because I think outside of the US, I think I've seen the data always from the Futera perspective. A lot of sales from the United Kingdom. I think it's probably the second biggest market if we think about collectibles. Maybe aside from China, that's probably a little bit. China is obviously bigger, but China's a strange case insofar as it's a little bit more secluded. Obviously, we've got the language barrier and stuff. So certainly, I think it's an exciting prospect. The United Kingdom at the moment for collectibles.
Well, hopefully we've put CardCon on the map through the podcast, and let some new people hear about it because, like I said, I have some friends and other content creators and stuff that made it to the London card show. But like I said, I was really impressed to see sort of the offerings and what you guys are doing. So I have a lot of faith that what you're building is going to be very well received, and I'm excited to sort of see what comes up at the show as far as content. And I'll keep an eye on those social feeds and stuff. But it's a bucket list. I got to get over to the pond and check out the card show at CardCon.
Come over, Zach. I'll take you to a soccer match.
Sweet.
So you can, learn the ropes. We can go for afternoon tea if you'd like. We can visit a pub and all the stereotypical things that you Americans think we do here in Britain. We can do them all. Downton Abbey. We can visit Downton Abbey.
There you go. There you go. Well, and the invite's always open the other way, Adam. You come over to the States and I'll make sure you're taken care of.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks. Yeah, of course. So, that's awesome, right? But you have another big focus too, which is your new startup Artifact. So can you tell us a little bit more about sort of that company and what you're offering?
Yeah. So Artifact is, I spent forever thinking of the names. It's hard, isn't it? And trying to find something so it's spelled slightly differently. ARTIP. Hold on, wait a minute.
Yeah, PHACT.
ARTIPHACT. Sorry, my dyslexia took over for a second then. But yeah, so it's what it is it's I think I've got a lot of knowledge now of the collectible space, and it's about sharing that, like how to build an audience, how to build hype, how to build a community. And I've kind of made it public now that I'm doing this. And I'm working with a couple of different companies, a company in the Nordics who are a collectible coins company, and potentially a few others as well, and obviously CardCon. And then, so there's two facets to it. There's that. So if you're a company in the collectible space and you're like, right, maybe you've done a release, it hasn't gone too well, or you're thinking, how can we actually build a community? How can we get people engaged? Then, I'd like you to have a conversation with me and see if I can help. And then on the flip side, there's another part to this, whereas because as part of my role with Futera, it was building the network with the athletes. I've sat down with so many big names, mainly in football, but also in other sports, and had them sign cards for Futera. And I've been on a real learning curve and made some mistakes and learn, the hard way in terms of who. Like I've got a pretty good grasp now of who one needs to speak to for any given player, because you get into these situations, Zach, where, like, if CJ is listening to this from Leaf, he'll have probably encountered this as well, because I was basically his equivalent at Futera, where someone will say, "I'm the guy for this guy or girl," and you're like, "Okay," and then you strike a deal and you realize that actually there was someone else in between, and that person's just taken quite a high percentage, and that's sometimes driven, that can sometimes drive the player out of the market, or it means that you've overpaid. And so I've kind of learned the hard way. I mean, there was one player in particular in England where I was charged a certain amount per autograph, and then I found who the actual contact was, and literally the next time we did a deal with them, I got the price down by half for Futera. So there was obviously something going on there, right? Yeah. And I've done this and I've learned the hard way. And also just working with these people, like, because it's easier said than done. Like some people, you see them around these people, they kind of like lose it a little bit. It's quite interesting to watch. They kind of like wobble. Like, oh, those famous persons are talking to me. I don't know what to do. So it can be a little bit intimidating. And also you've got to know how to structure a deal and get it done. And I've built those relationships. So I'm also saying to companies, well, if you want to use a player for your campaign, let's have a chat. Who do you want? A, I can get you to the right person. B, I can work on this deal for you, and then C, I can help you leverage it as well, because I've got that marketing experience, whereas a normal agent won't do this, right? A normal manager will just be like, it's going to cost you this much, whatever, you can have the content, but I'm not going to tell you how to leverage it. I'm not going to help you formulate the campaign, whereas I can do that bit. So there's a couple of different facets to Artifact, but yeah, it's ARTIPHACT .co.uk.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I've got it across the bottom of the screen, so those people watching will have it right, and then hopefully those people listening can write it down. That's really cool. And just sort of, I was perusing the website and sort of learning more about it, and I thought what was interesting is when you say the athlete appearances and being able to leverage them and help with other sort of content and sort of different experiences, right? That might not be traditional. It was VIP dinners and product endorsements and exclusive merch. Can you just maybe dive into real topically? It doesn't have to be a deep dive, but sort of some of those other sort of experiences that have worked well for you and that you maybe bring to the table that's a little different than a traditional agency?
Yeah, well, I think, one example of that is the work that I did with the London Card Show. Okay, it was different because I worked for Futera already, but I was like, right, this would be really cool for Futera as a brand building exercise if we actually did the signing session in public.
Mm-hmm.
There's another company in London that I'm talking to at the moment that have got a like a high end kind of whiskey store, and they're like, there's certain people within your network, especially on the legend side, that are quite classy now, that are a little bit older. And
Yep.
how cool would it be to get them to our shop? We do these exclusive nights because it's on. I won't say where it is actually in London, but it's in a very, very affluent part of London where people have got money to spend, and it's like an exclusive club. So it's going to be really cool for us to say to our members, right, this Wednesday we're going to have this former player who won a World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
Drink. We're all going to sit around. We're going to try some whiskey. The player's going to try the whiskey, and then he's going to talk to us about his career, and you're going to be able to ask him questions. I mean, that's a really great experience. I was out with a couple of friends a few months back, and one of them said to me, "Oh yeah, like it's my dad's retiring soon, and can you get so and so to play golf with him?" And I was like, "Yeah." I mean, it turns out like he didn't have the budget, but it got me thinking, how many other situations? There are probably lots of people out there as well that are like, it'd just be great for me, take my clients on like a business golf trip and have them play, because a lot of these lads play football with like a legend of Liverpool or a legend of Man United. So yeah, there's lots of different facets, and I think there's a lot of untapped resource here, and brands leave a lot on the table by not including like football legends in this country in their campaigns. Like these guys are really well thought of. People, the longer someone's retired, the more kind of people romanticize them. They appeal to a cohort now in terms of millennials and Gen Xers, and boomers to an extent, like where they've got a little bit more cash now to spend on these experiences and they want them. And I've done podcasts with these guys or little bits of media with them for other companies and stuff, and I sometimes like snip them down and put them on my TikTok. You go on my TikTok now, like all the content that I've done that's got the most traction, and I've not got a huge TikTok account, hundreds of thousands of views, is on the stuff where I'm interviewing these legends. So people are desperate to hear from them. They've got a really warm opinion of them. It'll be the same in the US with the guys that have retired from basketball, with American football, from baseball, and people love them and they want to hear from them, and they've got these stories, and then they go, I remember that, I was there that day. And by the way, that's really cool for me, because a lot of the time, like I remember I picked I had to drop a Liverpool legend off at the train station after an event I did with him, and I'm driving in my car and he's like sitting chatting to me, and I'm like, this is so weird. Like I remember when I was like 8 years old, watching him playing against my team, watching him in the World Cup, playing alongside David Beckham. And now he's just in my car and we're just having a chat about the kids. Yeah. Like how crazy is this? Like what's happened in my life? So yeah, anyway, there's loads of opportunities.
That's a cool full circle moment, man. That's awesome.
I know, right? I know.
Yeah. That's very cool. Well, it's amazing. And I love that you are able to bring to the table, not just that traditional marketing experience, but also being able to think outside the box, and maybe help some of these brands and companies with some innovation, right? Because things can get stale. And so when you do things that at first people think, oh, that might be a little bit strange or different, but then they really catch on. And I think that you're tapping into something really cool, Adam. So I'm excited to see where that all goes. So speaking about that though, and innovation, I'm curious, as far as the collectibles market goes, sort of what current trends are you seeing, and sort of what are maybe some big opportunities within the space as far as you're concerned?
I think this is going to be a controversial one, but the whole box breaking thing, Zach, I mean, you'll probably know better than me. You're constantly talking to people, and probably as much as I am. And the US again has driven this on platforms like Fanatics Live, like whatnot. I just see that as a beast of its own. And I've made the point before maybe some people haven't been happy with this, but I kind of feel like sometimes like that's just that's the driver, because I walk around these shows and I see a lot of cards that have been produced, and I do wonder that if without box breaking and the exposure and the explosion of platforms like Fanatics Live, like Whatnot, would we now be in a situation where the supply is outstripping demand so much that we would be back in an era that's akin to like the junk wax era? I don't know, right? But I just think that because the addictive nature, and this is a new way to buy cards that wasn't there before, what impact has this had? Now, that might be me overstating it. There might be people listening to this like, what is he talking about? Of course it's not. But hear me out, right? Now, I mean, again, I don't know if there's been any data on this. I need to find some if there is. But what percentage of collectors that meet the different buyer personas that I have here, what percentage of them are now buying their cards on Whatnot or platform or via a live shopping channel? I think it's probably getting higher and higher and higher. And so there's an addictive nature to it. It's engaging with a creator. It's the excitement of, like, you know, everyone loves the chase. That's what drives a lot of behavior on. And this feeds into that. So box breaking for me is absolutely huge. I think in terms of things that brands aren't doing outside of the collectible space, and I keep on banging the drum for this, I've done a video on it. It's on my LinkedIn about Delta Airlines and the way that they utilized trading cards specifically to engage with their audience, right? If you're watching this and you work for just a generic brand that targets
some Delta cards, I got them right here.
Beautiful. Aren't they beautiful? Like they did such a good job. Zach, tell me, did they use a pre-existing manufacturer to create them?
You know, I don't know. I just happened, my neighbor is a Delta captain, and I was like, hey, do you by any chance have any of those cards? He's like, yeah, I do. Here, take some. Because I wanted to check them out. I don't know who actually produced them, but they did a very nice job. They're like a chromium card, and they're high quality, and
yeah. That's been whenever I've seen them at shows, I've been like, these are wild. These are really, really good. So that's why I wondered if they just white labeled like tops or something like. So nevertheless, anyway, I think there's a real opportunity for brands to utilize collectibles to build that engagement with their audiences. And why not? You know, millennials, Zoomers in particular, are collecting now more than ever. There's more of us engaged in this space. And so if I'm a brand and I want to target these people in a way that's organic, and then also I want to utilize the content off the back of that, because go onto TikTok and type in Delta Airlines trading cards. It's filled with just free marketing for Delta, right? These huge influencers like knocking on the doors of your neighbor's, you know, the cabin while he's sitting there getting ready for a flight and saying, have you got any of these cards? And then filming it. And I think it's such a stellar job. And I think that's an opportunity for brands that maybe aren't within the hobby at the moment to engage. And then I think if you're, you know, what conversations I've had with the coin guys is I'm like, yeah, coins are great. And I genuinely believe that coins can go through a similar renaissance. I think coins can become cool again. I think as we move towards a society where we don't see coins as much, people will romanticize them. But what they need to do is develop some kind of chase element, and they need to incorporate other trading card elements and market their products in the same way that trading cards are marketed. They utilize influencers efficiently. And I think this is probably potential for other types of collectibles companies or companies that produce collectibles to kind of look at what's happened in the trading card space and learn from it. So a couple of different elements to that answer there.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I think you're dead on. I mean, obviously breaking is becoming huge here, for better or worse. You know, there's been a lot of controversies around it. So I think as that sort of business model continues to mature, that there's going to be some guidelines and things like that need to be sort of laid down, because we've had some scandals and weird stuff going on lately, that put it in a bad light. But as a whole, like you said, it definitely plays into people's addictive nature and gambling and, chasing hits. But also at the same time, I know for a fact I have some collector friends overseas, and it's really hard for them to get product.
Yes.
So what's interesting is that breaking potentially is a gateway for them to be able to buy into breaks and get the product that they're looking for. It will get shipped to them. I'm sure it's going to cost them more than it would over here, but the point is that they could have access to product that they might not otherwise have, which I think is really interesting. And, I think it's a great point about the collectibles with Delta, right? Like that whole concept of creating cards around planes, which is a otherwise boring thing, is excited people. And there's social media vibe and buzz about, going on and asking a captain for, their card or whatever it might be. So, you just start to see collectibles become more and more mainstream, like you said. And I think that's what's really interesting about this space. There's so many different ways that you can go with collectibles. As you mentioned, it's coins, it's booze, it's watches. There's just, it's almost endless, right? And it's all just really fascinating. And that's why I have this podcast. And right now, a lot of it's been focused around the hobby, but I hope to continue to grow it to, artwork and comics and coins and all these other wonderful collectibles, and learning more about those spaces. So it's been really cool to listen to you from the marketing side, and sort of learn a little bit more about how your brain works and where your head goes with all of this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate having me on. It's really, really good, Zach. You do a great job with this podcast as well. And yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, again, this is just stuff that's in my head. Some of it I've tried, some of it's worked. It might not work in different contexts. In fact, you reminded me as you were talking then, because I thought, of another example where they're being used, trading cards specifically are being used. I get like notifications on like whenever Google mentions trading cards, like once a week, it gives me a summary. And there was a police department in somewhere like Wisconsin or somewhere like that, somewhere in the United States, and they'd released trading cards for all of their officers.
That's awesome.
And I listened, and it was on there. It was on like one of your local news channels. Yeah. They covered it, and the chief officer or whatever was saying, yeah, it's just a really nice way for us to kind of like humanize the policemen and women. Mm-hmm. And the kids come up and they can, and when we do these open days, they can get packs and stuff and they can open them, and they're trying to collect and then they see them in the street. And I just thought, what a really nice, wholesome way to utilize collectibles in something that you think, where's the connection there? Well, there it is. And that's a way of them building, a relationship with their community, their customers, for want of a better word. You know what I mean? The people that they're supposed to serve, right? And it humanizes them. And I think there's so many opportunities across the board from that. But whether people will listen to me, Zach, that is a different thing.
Well, it's a crowded space and there's a lot of voices, but you just keep doing a good job, and people will find you and you'll connect with the right people. So speaking of the future though, I'm curious, what are your goals for the next 12, 24 months, and sort of what are you most excited about for you?
Well, I was going to say to stay in the hobby, but I think I need to switch from defense to offense now a little bit more. Like I think I'm probably in the hobby now, to stay working on this side. For me, it's to continue to, whatever I put my name to publicly, because my personality type, if we think about this in a Myers-Briggs context, which some of your listeners may be familiar with, that is I'm an ENFP, which means I'm a campaigner by default, right? That's my default setting, is to campaign for things. And so that's probably why I go in the direction that I've gone in. I'll just automatically become the face and the mouthpiece of whatever it is that I'm representing. I.e., when I was Futera, I was the PR guy, and for CardCon, I've done that. So one of the clients in particular that I'm working with at the moment is doing some really cool stuff. They're thinking about, they're trying to acquire some football licenses now on the coin side. I think, as I mentioned, obviously we've spoken about that. So that's really exciting to me. So again, I think it's like the next thing that I do after CardCon, I'll be very public with it. And it's just about me continuously learning, doing a good job, creating something that collectors want, just continuing to build on the work that I've already done. I like to think that on the whole, if you speak to most people, they say, oh yeah, I did a good job at Futera, he's done a good job at CardCon, seems like a pretty decent guy. He wants the best for us. If you're a collector, that's important as well. And the passion hopefully just comes through. So it's just continuing to build on that. And hopefully as well, Zach, at a more kind of like base level, it's working with more elements of the hobby, right? I've worked for a manufacturer now. I've worked with a trading card show now. I've done a fairly good job. I've got a few other things in play. As I say, coins is a new element for me. But then it's like, right, are there any other elements that I've not covered yet? But the next thing that I work on, that again, it's got to be a success. And I've got a little bit of a personal mission as well with the coins thing, where I genuinely do believe that I can help play a part in making coins cool again.
Yeah.
The Josh Luber You know, when he wrote that white paper on trading cards,
Yep.
trading cards cool again.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, all of us, I suppose, in the industry know about that white paper. For me, I'm like, I don't see why not. You know, I look at the renaissance of vinyl CDs, trading cards, obviously, books, like people buying physical books again, and then becoming collectibles within their own right. And I'm like, I wonder if I can. This is a good challenge, a beefy challenge to get into. And those guys make very beautiful coins, the company that I'm, working with. So yeah, that might be my next one. But overall, mate, it's just continuing to hopefully do a good job.
Love it. I love it. Well, you're definitely doing a great job. And obviously, this has been an awesome conversation. And I don't want to take up too much of your time because it's awesome that you've stuck around for the hour that we've chatted. But before I let you go, I do like to ask all my guests if you could sort of give one valuable tip in your case to maybe an aspiring entrepreneur or marketer, what would that advice be?
Oh, wow, that's a big question. One piece of advice. I think it's true. This is going to sound really cliche. I don't know there's any way that I can't answer this question without it sounding like a cliche.
That's okay, man.
I feel like you've got to really kind of work out what you're good at, right? Know thyself, right? And it takes time, and maybe it takes some people longer than others, but it's only when I really did some really good work on myself, like really thought about, okay, what do I bring to the table? Because ultimately I was always focused on what I wasn't good at. And my wife used to say to me, like, but you're not that, don't try and be like that, because that's not the way you're engineered. Like, why are you getting, het up about the fact that you can't do X, Y, and Z when you've got all these different skills here? So it was like, right, okay, I need to double down on them and just become really good at them things, like the bits that I'm naturally, that only I can do type thing, right? But you have to do a lot of self-analysis and probably ask some kind of like tough questions. And I would advise everybody to do the Myers-Briggs stuff as well. And like learn like your personality type. Okay, it's not exact science, and of course we're all different and stuff. And you can't put people in a box easily. However, there are certain traits that you have got, and it's about working out what they are and then thinking, right, okay, how can I apply these in this situation to do the best job that I can do? And then just double down and work hard. And I like to think then eventually, and I've still got a lot to learn, I'm only 35, but things start to kind of, my experience has been that things start to fall into place. So yeah, that would be it, kind of like work out what it is you're good at, do that self-analysis, do that work, and then just plow ahead. And also don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Easier said than done. If you're an introvert, it can be hard, I think, to turn the camera on. But yourself, Zach, like you've got to put yourself out there in the world today. Like personal brand is pretty much everything. Like you've got to make sure that people are aware of what you're doing, because you could be doing fantastic work. I was on a train the other day down to London with a lad that I went to school with, and he works in, like, he's a designer, and he designs really premium like chairs for like big brands, like what people pay thousands of pounds for, settees and sofas and stuff like this. And I was like, I had no idea. I was like to him, I've got you on LinkedIn, you never speak about this. He's like, yeah, I know, I don't want people to think that I'm a big head. And I'm like, okay, fine, but like you've got to tell people what you're doing, because there might be, you could build you're the guy that creates these beautiful chairs that people pay thousands of pounds for.
Yes.
So yeah, you got to push yourself and promote yourself and get comfortable with that as well.
I love that. That's great. And I think it's that combination of when you can, like you said, find what your strengths are personally, and then you combine that with a passion. That's where the real magic happens. And it sounds like you're on your road, to doing that, Adam. And I think it's really cool, man. So congrats on all the success.
Thank you, mate.
Yeah, of course. So before I let you go, shameless plug. Obviously, I've been putting a banner across the bottom for people who are watching, but if they're listening, you want to tell people where they can find you? Yeah,
so I do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. I like LinkedIn. LinkedIn gets a lot of flack from people, but I like it. It's quite nice. It's good. It's been very good to me, that platform, as I feel like that's where I'm most active. Started to try and do more TikTok at 35. I was thinking maybe I'm a little bit past the old TikTok thing, but of course that's nonsense. So yeah, okay, you won't find any videos of me dancing to the latest the latest Drake song.
Music, yeah.
That's right, yeah. But what I try and do on there is just kind of like, again, constantly think about what do people want, what are people actually going to want to watch. And I sit down with all these really famous footballers. So how about just talking about like what that experience is like? How about, talking about what I observed within the collectible space, because it's a passion and it's very big right now. So a lot of the content I put on TikTok is around that. And then I've got my website. We mentioned Instagram before this, and I did flirt with building a profile on Instagram, but you can't do it all, can you, Zach? So no. I just keep that for pictures of that's a private account. I keep that for pictures of the kids and the dogs, and
there you go.
Yeah.
Not to interrupt, but if so on TikTok, you can find him at Partadam, P-A-R-T-A-D-A-M. And then again, his website is artifact.co.uk, and it's artiphact.co.uk. So cool, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show, man. It's been an awesome conversation, and you have an incredible journey, and you're truly an expert in the world of marketing and collectibles. And I just appreciate you taking time to come on, talk with me on the show. I'm excited for the guests to sort of learn more about you. And I'm excited to see what happens at CardCon, and then, what else 2025 has in store for you. So thanks so much for coming on, Adam.
No, thank you, mate. And let's keep in contact, Zach. And if I do come out to the United States, I'll give you a shout.
I love that. I love that, man. Well, be well, and we will talk soon, my friend.
Take care.
Guys, a huge shout out to everyone watching and listening. I appreciate your time, and I hope you found some inspiration or learned something new today. If you enjoyed the show, please do me a favor. Like, follow, subscribe, and most importantly, share with your friends. Your support's going to be what helps keep Hobby Hustle community growing. And remember, keep collecting, keep hustling, and we'll see you next week on Hobby Hustle, where passion, collecting, and business collide. Thanks so much.
Hobby Hustle is brought to you by Collector Creative. If you're a collectible brand or company looking for help with marketing, branding, design, or development, head over to collectorcreative.com and drop Zach a line. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, connect with us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at collector_creative. And be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'll see you next time on Hobby Hustle, where collecting passion and business collide.